The metal chair creaked under Commander Zexthul's weight as he shifted uncomfortably. His massive frame looked strange in the small interrogation room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship. The bright lights hurt his compound eyes, and the chains around his wrists felt heavier than they should. 3 alien diplomats sat across from him at a curved table, their faces showing different expressions of curiosity and concern. "Begin your testimony," said the lead diplomat, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. "Tell us what happened during the invasion of the human homeworld." Zexthul's mandibles clicked nervously. He had been a proud warrior of the Krillian Empire for over 2 decades. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had led armies that crushed entire civilizations. But sitting here now, remembering what had happened on Earth, made his exoskeleton tremble. "We thought it would be easy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The humans were supposed to be primitive. Our intelligence reports said they had barely left their own planet. They still used chemical rockets. They still fought wars with metal bullets and explosive devices." The blue-skinned diplomat leaned forward. "But you sent 12 dreadnoughts to conquer 1 world. That seems like excessive force for a primitive species." Zexthul's eyes darkened. "Admiral Kethvar wanted to make sure. He said it was better to have too much power than too little. Besides, we planned to use Earth as a staging ground for conquering the rest of their solar system. We thought the humans would surrender quickly when they saw our ships." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Zexthul closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to that terrible day when everything had gone wrong. "I was aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest," he continued. "We dropped out of hyperspace near their outer planets. The plan was simple. Show them our power, demand their surrender, and then occupy their major cities. We expected the entire operation to take maybe 3 of their days." He paused, remembering the confidence that had filled the bridge that morning. Captain Veltar had been joking about which human city he wanted to govern. The weapons officers had been complaining that they might not get to fire a single shot. Everyone had expected the humans to give up immediately. "The first sign that something was wrong came from our long-range sensors," Zexthul said. "We detected movement near the planet Jupiter. At first, we thought it was just space debris, or maybe some of their primitive satellites. But then our sensor operator announced that there were ships moving toward us." The diplomat with 6 eyes and green skin spoke up. "Human ships? I thought you said they were primitive." "That's what we all thought," Zexthul replied. "But these ships were moving fast. Much faster than anything in our intelligence reports. They were sleek and silver, and they moved in formation like a school of fish. Our tactical computers couldn't identify their design." Zexthul remembered the confusion on the bridge as the sensor readings came in. The human ships were accelerating at speeds that should have been impossible for biological beings to survive. Their formation was perfect, like they had been practicing this maneuver for years. "Admiral Kethvar ordered us to open communication channels," he continued. "We wanted to offer them a chance to surrender before we destroyed their fleet. But the humans never responded to our messages. They just kept coming." The memory made Zexthul's skin crawl. The human ships had approached in complete silence, their weapons powered, but not firing. It was like watching predators stalk their prey, patient and calculating. "Then we detected more ships," he said. "They were coming from behind Jupiter's moons, from the asteroid belt, even from the direction of their sun. Dozens of them. Our intelligence had been completely wrong. The humans had a real fleet." The lead diplomat made a note on his tablet. "How many ships did they have?" "We counted at least 40, Zexthul answered. "But they kept appearing on our sensors. By the time we realized what was happening, we were surrounded. They had positioned themselves in a perfect sphere around our fleet. We were trapped. He remembered the growing panic on the bridge as the tactical situation became clear. Admiral Kethvar had ordered the fleet to assume defensive positions. But it was too late. The humans had outmaneuvered them completely. The strangest part was how they moved, Zexthel said. Each ship seemed to know exactly where the others were going. They flowed around each other like they were connected by invisible threads. Our computers couldn't predict their movements because they weren't following any logical pattern. The third diplomat, a creature that looked like a walking crystal, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Did you identify their commander? Later, we learned that a human named Jake Morrison was leading their fleet, Zexthel replied. But during the battle, we couldn't figure out who was giving orders. The human ships moved like they were all thinking with one mind. Every decision was made instantly, and every ship responded at the same time. Zexthel's voice grew quieter as he remembered what happened next. Admiral Kethvar decided to break through their formation. He ordered all ships to fire at once and punch a hole in their line. We thought our superior firepower would scatter them. The room was completely silent now. All three diplomats were leaning forward, waiting to hear what had happened when the Krillian Empire's finest fleet engaged the humans in battle. That's when we learned our first lesson about fighting humans, Zexthel said, his voice filled with something that might have been fear. They don't fight the way other species fight. They don't follow the rules. And they definitely don't run away when they're outnumbered. Zexthel's claw scraped against the metal table as he continued his story. The three diplomats watched him carefully, noting how his entire body seemed to shake when he talked about the humans. Admiral Kethvar gave the order to fire. Zexthel sighed. Every weapon on every ship opened up at once. The space between our fleets lit up like a star. We were sure that nothing could survive that much firepower. He paused, his compound eyes staring at something the diplomats couldn't see. For a few seconds, we thought we had won. The energy blasts were so bright that our sensors couldn't see through them. But when the light faded, all the human ships were still there. Not one of them had been destroyed. The blue-skinned diplomat frowned. How is that possible? Krillian weapons are among the most powerful in the galaxy. That's what we thought too, Zexthel replied. But the humans had done something impossible. They had moved their entire fleet in the exact moment we fired. Every ship changed position at the same time, like they had practiced this dance 1,000 times. Our targeting computers couldn't track them because they moved too fast and too precisely. Zexthel remembered the shocked silence on the bridge. Admiral Kethvar had stood frozen, staring at the display screens that showed human ships exactly where they shouldn't be. The tactical officer had run the sensor data 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then the humans attacked. He continued, but they didn't do what we expected. Instead of firing back at us, they split into small groups and scattered in every direction. Some went up, some went down, some curved around behind us. Within minutes, they had us surrounded from every angle. The crystal diplomat made a sound like breaking glass. Described their weapons. That's the thing, Zexthel said, his voice getting quieter. At first, we couldn't figure out what they were shooting at us. The energy signatures were unlike anything in our databases. Then we realized they weren't using energy weapons at all. They were firing chunks of metal at incredible speeds. He remembered the confusion among the weapons officers. Krillian shields were designed to stop energy blasts and plasma bolts. They weren't built to handle solid projectiles moving at near light speed. The metal slugs punched right through our shields like they weren't even there, Zexthel explained. But that wasn't the worst part. The humans weren't trying to destroy our ships completely. They were targeting specific systems: engine cores, weapon arrays, communication dishes. They knew exactly where to hit us to cause the most damage. The Lead diplomat leaned forward. How could they know Krillian ship design so well? We asked ourselves the same question, Zexthel replied. Later, we learned that a human named Lisa Carter had spent years studying every piece of Krillian technology they could get their hands on. Somehow, they knew more about our own ships than some of our own engineers. Zexthel's mandibles clicked as he remembered the growing panic on the bridge. Ship after ship reported critical damage. The Eternal Conquest's sister ship, Void Hammer, had lost all power and was drifting helplessly. The destroyer Bloodstar was leaking atmosphere from dozens of holes. But the thing that really scared us was how the humans flew, he said. One of their pilots, a human called Ryan Brooks, was doing maneuvers that should have killed him. He was pulling turns so sharp that the gravitational force should have crushed his body. But somehow, he kept fighting. Zexthel remembered watching the sensor display in horror as the human pilot's ship twisted and spun through space like a living creature. Brooks had flown his ship between two Krillian destroyers, firing constantly, then pulled a turn so tight that he ended up behind both ships before they could react. Our tactical computers couldn't predict what the humans would do next, he continued. Every time we thought we had them figured out, they would do something completely different. It was like fighting ghosts that could appear anywhere at any time. The green-skinned diplomat made notes on his tablet. What about your casualties? By the end of the first hour, we had lost 3 ships completely, Zexthel said. 5 more were too damaged to fight, and we hadn't destroyed a single human vessel. Not one. He remembered Admiral Kethver, pacing back and forth on the bridge, his usually calm demeanor completely gone. The Admiral kept asking his officers how a primitive species could be defeating the finest fleet in the Krillian Empire. Then something even worse happened, Zexthel continued. The humans stopped attacking our ships and started attacking us directly. They began boarding operations. The room grew very quiet. Boarding operations were considered extremely dangerous, even between ships of similar technology levels. The idea that humans would try to board superior alien vessels seemed insane. A human soldier named Amy Foster led the first boarding party, Zexthel said. She and her team somehow cut through our hull armor with tools we didn't recognize. By the time our security forces reached the breach, the humans were already inside our ship. Zexthel's voice became a whisper. They moved through our corridors like they had been there before. They knew which passages led to critical systems and which ones were dead ends. It was like they had blueprints of our own ships. He remembered the reports coming in from all over the ship. Human soldiers were appearing in sections that should have been impossible to reach. They were setting explosive charges on important equipment, then disappearing before security teams could respond. Sergeant Foster's team reached our main computer core in less than 20 minutes, he said. They didn't try to destroy it. Instead, they plugged in some kind of device and downloaded our entire tactical database. Then they vanished as quickly as they had appeared. The crystal diplomat's voice rang out sharp and clear. They stole your military information? Worse than that, Zexthel replied. They left behind a message. When our computer technicians finally accessed the core, they found a recording from Foster. She thanked us for the information and told us that every ship in our fleet would be destroyed within the next 2 hours. Zexthel closed his eyes, remembering the cold feeling that had settled in his stomach when he heard that message. The humans weren't just fighting them. They were toying with them, like predators playing with wounded prey. That's when Admiral Kethver realized we weren't fighting a primitive species, he said. We were fighting something far more dangerous than we had ever imagined. Zexthel's breathing became heavy as he prepared to tell the next part of his story. The diplomats noticed how his claws kept scratching at the table, leaving deep marks in the metal surface. After losing half our fleet in space, Admiral Kethvar. "Made a desperate decision," he said. He ordered the surviving ships to land ground forces on the human planet. We thought that even if their space navy was strong, their ground armies would be weak like most primitive species. The blue-skinned diplomat tilted his head. "How many soldiers did you deploy?" 50,000 of our finest warriors, Zexthul replied. We landed in 12 different locations around their planet. Major cities, military bases, important factories. The plan was to capture key positions and force the humans to surrender. Zexthul closed his eyes, remembering the confidence he had felt when his transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere. He had been so sure that ground combat would be different. Quillian warriors were bigger and stronger than humans. Their armor was thicker, their weapons more powerful. "I was part of the force that landed in one of their largest cities," he continued. "A place called New York. We expected to find frightened civilians and maybe a few local police with simple weapons. Instead, we found something that still gives me nightmares." He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh lights of the interrogation room. The city was empty, not abandoned, but deliberately cleared. Every building, every street, every tunnel was silent. It felt like walking into a trap. The green-skinned diplomat made a note. Where were the humans? "Everywhere and nowhere," Zexthul answered. "We advanced through the streets in standard formation, but we couldn't find any enemies to fight. Then the attacks started, not from the front or the sides, but from above and below. The humans were using their own city against us." Zexthul remembered the first explosion. It had come from underneath a busy intersection where his squad was crossing. The entire street collapsed, sending 20 Krillian warriors falling into the underground tunnels below. A human called Ben Hayes was commanding their defense, he said. But he wasn't fighting us the way military commanders are supposed to fight. Instead of meeting us in open battle, he turned every building into a fortress and every street into a killing ground. The crystal diplomat's voice chimed softly, described their tactics. "They used the city itself as a weapon," Zexthul replied. "We would enter a building to clear it, and the humans would collapse the entire structure on top of us. We would advance down a street, and they would flood it with poisonous gas from the sewer systems." He remembered trying to lead his warriors through a maze of streets that seemed to change every few minutes. Roads that had been clear would suddenly be blocked by walls of debris. Passages that looked safe would turn into death traps filled with hidden explosives. The worst part was that we never saw most of the humans who were attacking us, Zexthul continued. They would strike from impossible distances, then disappear before we could respond. It was like fighting invisible enemies who knew every secret. Passage in their own city. Zexthul's voice grew quieter as he remembered his first encounter with human civilians. We finally cornered what we thought was a non-combatant. A female human wearing a white coat. She looked like a medical worker, so we thought she might have information about military positions. The 3 diplomats leaned forward, sensing that this part of the story was especially important. Her name was Maya Rodriguez, and she claimed to be an engineer, Zexthul said. She acted scared and helpless, just like we expected a primitive civilian to act. She even offered to help us navigate the city's tunnel system. He paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. She led us into the underground transportation network, said it would be a safe way to move our forces without being seen from above. We thought we had finally found a human we could trust. Zexthul's entire body shuddered as he remembered what happened next. The tunnels were filled with water. Rodriguez claimed it was normal, just part of the city's drainage system. But after we had been walking for 20 minutes, the water level started rising. The lead diplomat frowned. "A flood? Not a natural flood," Zexthul replied. Rodriguez had led us into a trap. The water wasn't just water anymore. She had somehow mixed chemicals into it that burned through our armor. The tunnels became rivers of acid, and we were trapped in the middle of them. Zexthil remembered the screams of his warriors as their protective gear dissolved around them. Rodriguez had smiled as she watched them panic, then disappeared through a hidden door that only she knew about. That's when we realized that there were no real civilians on this planet, he said. Every human was a potential warrior. The old ones, the young ones, even the ones who looked harmless were all part of their defense plan. The green-skinned diplomat looked disturbed. All of them? We encountered a human called Nick Thompson, Zexthil continued. He wore the clothes of a scientist and carried medical equipment. We thought he was trying to help wounded humans, so we ignored him at first. Zexthil's voice became barely audible. Thompson wasn't helping the wounded. He was studying us. Every time we fought his people, he would appear afterward to examine our dead warriors. He was learning about our biology, our weaknesses, our anatomy. The crystal diplomat made a sound like cracking ice. For what purpose? To make better weapons, Zexthil whispered. Thompson was creating new ways to kill Krillian soldiers. Poisons that targeted our specific body chemistry, gases that only affected our breathing systems, diseases that would spread through our ranks. Zexthil remembered finding Thompson's laboratory in the basement of a destroyed hospital. The walls were covered with detailed drawings of Krillian anatomy, and the tables were full of chemical compounds designed to cause maximum pain and damage. By the end of the first day, we had lost 3,000 warriors, he said. Not in glorious battle, but in traps and ambushes and slow, horrible deaths. The humans were turning warfare into a science, and we were their test subjects. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Zexthil's labored breathing. The three diplomats exchanged worried glances, beginning to understand why the mighty Krillian Empire had retreated from a single planet. That was just the beginning, Zexthil said, his voice filled with dread. The real horror started when the humans began their psychological attacks. Zexthil's voice became almost a whisper as he continued his testimony. His compound eyes darted nervously around the room, as if he expected humans to appear from the shadows at any moment. The physical attacks were terrible, he said, but what the humans did to our minds was much worse. They seemed to understand how we think better than we understood ourselves. The blue-skinned diplomat leaned forward. Explain what you mean. It started with a human named Susan Wells, Zexthil replied. She was some kind of military leader, but she didn't fight us with weapons. She fought us with fear. Zexthil remembered the first time he heard Wells speaking on the Krillian communication channels. Her voice had been calm and friendly, like she was talking to old friends instead of enemies trying to conquer her planet. Wells began broadcasting messages directly to our forces, he continued. But she wasn't trying to make us surrender or leave. Instead, she would describe exactly how each of our units was going to die. The crystal diplomat made a sound like wind through broken glass. She threatened you? No, Zexthil said, shaking his head. Threats we could handle. Wells didn't threaten us. She made predictions. She would say things like, the unit advancing on 5th Street will lose 12 soldiers to the explosive device hidden under the blue car in exactly 7 minutes. Zexthil's claws scraped against the table as he remembered the growing terror among his troops. The worst part was that she was always right. Every prediction came true exactly as she said it would. It was like she could see the future. The green-skinned diplomat made notes rapidly. How was that possible? We never figured it out, Zexthil admitted. Wells seemed to know everything about our tactics, our equipment, even our personal habits. She would broadcast the names of specific soldiers and tell them exactly how they were going to be killed and when. Zexthil remembered the breakdown of military discipline as his warriors became paralyzed by fear. Soldiers who had conquered entire star systems were reduced to trembling wrecks, afraid to move because Wells had told them what would happen if they did. Then the humans started using our own wounded against us, he said. We would find injured Krillian soldiers lying on the battlefield, calling for help. Our medics would rush to save them, but when they got close, the wounded soldiers would explode. The three diplomats exchanged horrified glances. Using wounded soldiers as weapons violated every rule of civilized warfare. But they weren't really our soldiers, Zexthal continued. The humans had somehow created perfect disguises that made their own people look exactly like us. A human called Tom Baker led these fake wounded soldier operations. Zexthal's voice became hoarse as he remembered the paranoia that had spread through the Krillian ranks. After a few of these attacks, our medics became afraid to help anyone. We couldn't tell which wounded soldiers were real and which were human traps. Our entire medical system collapsed. The lead diplomat set down his tablet. This is beyond conventional warfare. The humans didn't follow any conventional rules, Zexthal replied. They turned everything we knew about combat upside down. We couldn't trust our own eyes, our own wounded, even our own communication systems. Zexthal remembered the day when human voices started appearing on supposedly secure Krillian channels. A human communications expert named Kate Morgan had somehow broken their military encryption codes. Morgan didn't use our communications to spread false information, he said. Instead, she used them to prove how much the humans knew about us. She would broadcast the real names of our officers, their family histories, even their personal fears and weaknesses. The crystal diplomat's voice chimed with disbelief. She knew personal information about your soldiers? Everything, Zexthal whispered. Morgan would get on the radio and say things like, Commander Velkoff, your mate back home is expecting eggs next month. It would be a shame if you never got to see them hatch, because you're too proud to retreat from this hopeless battle. Zexthal's entire body shuddered as he remembered the psychological impact of these broadcasts. Warriors who had been brave in the face of physical danger crumbled when the humans demonstrated knowledge of their most private thoughts and memories. The humans somehow knew which of our soldiers had families, which ones were afraid of enclosed spaces, which ones had nightmares about previous battles, he continued. They used this information to create personalized psychological attacks. The green-skinned diplomat looked disturbed. How could they gather such detailed intelligence? We never found out, Zexthal said, but the effect was devastating. Our soldiers began to believe that the humans could read their minds. Some warriors refused to fight because they were convinced the humans already knew every move they would make. Zexthal remembered the final psychological attack that had broken his own resolve. He had been leading a squad through an abandoned human building when Kate, Morgan's voice, came through his personal communicator. She spoke directly to me, he said. She knew my name, my rank, my service record. She knew about the scar on my left arm from a battle 20 years ago. She even knew the name of my childhood pet. The room fell completely silent as Zexthal continued. Morgan told me that the humans had been watching our species for much longer than we realized. She said they knew everything about Krillian culture, our military tactics, even our deepest fears. Then she asked me a question that still haunts me. The lead diplomat waited several seconds before asking, "What question?" She asked me why I thought we had been allowed to reach Earth in the first place, Zexthal said. She suggested that maybe the humans had wanted us to invade. Maybe the entire battle was just a test to see what we were capable of. Zexthal's voice became barely audible. Morgan said that humans had been studying dozens of alien species for years, waiting to see which ones would be stupid enough to attack their homeworld. She thanked me for volunteering my people to be their research subjects. The crystal diplomat made a sound like shattering stone. Research subjects? That's when I realized the horrible truth, Zexthel said. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were learning about us. Every attack we made, every tactic we used, every weakness we showed them was being recorded and analyzed. Zextel's compound eyes reflected pure terror as he finished this part of his testimony. We thought we were the predators hunting primitive prey, but we were wrong. We were the prey, and the humans were studying us to decide whether we were worth keeping alive. Zextel's entire body trembled as he reached the final part of his testimony. The three diplomats could see that whatever had happened next had broken something fundamental in the once proud Krillian commander. Admiral Kethvor finally gave the order to retreat, he said. We had lost over half our ground forces and most of our fleet. What was left of our army was completely demoralized. The admiral thought that if we could just get back to space, we could escape and warn the Empire about the human threat. The blue-skinned diplomat frowned. But you did escape. You're here giving testimony. We thought we had escaped, Zexthel replied. But the humans had other plans. They weren't content to just drive us away from their planet. They wanted to make sure we could never threaten them again. Zexthel remembered the relief he had felt when his transport ship lifted off from the human city. Looking down at Earth from orbit, he had thought the nightmare was finally over. He was wrong. As our ships tried to leave the solar system, we detected more human vessels, he continued. But these weren't the same ships that had fought us in the initial battle. These were bigger, more advanced. It was like the humans had been hiding their real fleet the entire time. The green-skinned diplomat looked confused. They had reserves? Not reserves, Zexthel said. A completely different navy. The ships we had fought before were apparently just their defensive force. These new vessels were built for attack and pursuit. Zexthel's voice grew hoarse as he remembered the sensor readings that had filled the bridge with panic. The new human ships were faster than anything in the Krillian fleet, and they were moving to intercept the retreating aliens. A human commander named Dan Foster led the pursuit fleet, he said. But he didn't try to destroy our ships immediately. Instead, he followed us. For days and days, his ships stayed just at the edge of our sensor range, watching everything we did. The crystal diplomat made a chiming sound. Why didn't they attack? We asked ourselves the same question, Zexthel replied. Foster's ships could have destroyed us easily, but they just kept following. Then we started receiving reports from other Krillian fleets throughout the galaxy. Human ships had appeared near our supply bases, our communication relays, even our home colonies. Zexthel remembered the growing horror as the reports came in. Somehow, the humans had learned the locations of every important Krillian military installation. They weren't just pursuing the invasion fleet. They were tracking the entire Krillian Empire. The humans began attacking our supply lines, he continued. Not our main battle fleets, but the cargo ships and fuel depots that kept our military running. A human named Rachel Stone led these raids. She seemed to know exactly which targets would cause the most damage. The lead diplomat set down his tablet with shaking hands. They were planning to invade your territory? Worse than that, Zexthel whispered. They were planning to conquer us. The entire defense of Earth had been designed to study our capabilities and learn our weaknesses. Every battle, every defeat, every small victory we thought we had achieved was just giving the humans more information about how to destroy us. Zexthel's compound eyes reflected the harsh lights as he remembered the moment when everything became clear. His ship had been limping through space, trying to reach a Krillian outpost, when Rachel Stone's vessel had appeared directly in front of them. Stone could have destroyed our ship with a single shot, he said. Instead, she boarded us. Just like Amy Foster had done during the space battle, but this time there was no resistance. Our crew was too broken to fight. The three diplomats waited in tense silence as Zexthel gathered the strength to continue. Stone didn't come to steal information or plant explosives, he said. She came to deliver a message. She walked onto our bridge like she owned the ship and handed Admiral Kethfor a data tablet. Zexthel's voice became barely audible. The tablet contained a complete analysis of every mistake the Krillian Empire had made during the invasion. But it also contained something much worse. It had detailed plans for how the humans intended to carry the war to our home worlds. The crystal diplomat's voice cracked like breaking ice. They were going to invade your empire? The plans were incredibly detailed, Zexthel replied. They showed exactly how human forces would attack our major colonies, which of our allies. They would target first, even how they would deal with our civilian populations. It was like they had been planning this for decades. Zexthel remembered Admiral Kethfer's face as he read through the human war plans. The proud military leader had aged 20 years in 20 minutes, realizing the scope of what they had unleashed. But the most terrifying part was the final section of the plans, Zexthel continued. It was written by a human general named Chris Adams. He explained that the invasion of Earth had never been about defending their planet. It had been about evaluating potential threats to human expansion. The room fell completely silent, except for the sound of Zexthel's labored breathing. Adams wrote that humanity had been monitoring dozens of alien species for years, he said. They were waiting to see which civilizations would be aggressive enough to attack Earth first. Those species would be marked for elimination or conquest. The rest would be left alone for now. The green-skinned diplomat's voice shook. They used your invasion as a test. A test and a learning experience, Zexthel replied. Every tactic we used, every weapon we fired, every strategy we employed, was recorded and analyzed. The humans now know exactly how to defeat not just the Krillian Empire, but any species that fights like we do. Zexthel looked directly at each of the 3 diplomats, his compound eyes reflecting pure terror. Stone told Admiral Kethfor that the human military had been studying galactic civilizations for much longer than anyone realized. She said they already had detailed invasion plans for over 50 different species. The lead diplomat's voice was barely a whisper. What did Admiral Kethfor do? He ordered the immediate retreat of all Krillian forces from human space, Zexthel said. He sent emergency messages to every Krillian colony, warning them about the human threat. Then he did something no Krillian admiral had ever done before. He surrendered. Zexthel's entire body sagged as he reached the end of his testimony. Stone accepted our surrender, but she made it clear that this was just a temporary arrangement. She said the humans would decide later whether the Krillian Empire was worth keeping alive or if we should be eliminated as a threat to galactic peace. The 3 diplomats sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the true horror of what they had heard. That's why I'm here, Zexthel said, to warn you all. The humans aren't just another species trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. They're predators who have been planning galactic conquest for longer than any of us realized. And now they have all the information they need to destroy us all.